I have a bit of a strange and potentially creepy story that I've toyed with sending in to you, and after I worked out some of the details with my wife, I decided why not. The story is about a vacation that my wife and I took a few years back. One that I could probably never forget if I tried. We don't get the chance to really take vacations anymore, because we have a little one, but most of our vacations were fairly normal and uneventful. This one, however, was anything but. After talking about what we wanted to do for some time away, we settled on a quaint little beach town for our vacation. It was a little picture-perfect kind of place, the kind where the houses have all those neat little flower boxes hooked to the windows, and everyone knows each other. We'd rented out this adorable little old cottage off the beaten path, surrounded by woods, and only a couple moments away from the ocean. It was our first night there, and the place was dead quiet. Not the kind of quiet where you can hear the sirens or cars on the highway off in the distance. No, this was that deep and almost unnatural silence. I was sitting on the porch, the cool evening breeze carrying the scent of the ocean to me, with the moon illuminating the woods around us in this pale and eerie glow. It was probably the most soothing and peaceful thing I have ever experienced in my life. We were sitting on the swinging bench on the front porch, just taking in the beautiful night, when somewhere in the distance we heard a soft rustling. Initially, I passed it off as the wind, but then I thought that I saw something. Or rather, saw someone out of the corner of my eye. I turned to the left to look at the edge of the woods, and sure enough, there was a figure that was definitely human-shaped, just kind of standing there still as a statue. It kind of creeped me out, but after a few moments my logical side kicked in, and I figured that it must just be a neighbor out for a late-night stroll. After a few seconds of them just kind of standing there, they turned to walk back into the woods slowly. And this kind of put me in a weird place mentally. So I mentioned to my wife that I wanted to go ahead and head to bed. She agreed, and that was that. But that wasn't the end of it. The figure became a bit of a recurring sight, seemingly just there late in the evening, just standing on the edge of the woods. The strangest part was that every night we saw it, it would just stand there on the edge of the woods. It never got closer to the cottage or really further into the woods at all. It would just stand there in the same spot until it decided it was done. Then it would turn around and disappear. Honestly, it felt like it was watching us. And as much as I wanted to believe that this was just some person being a creep or whatever, I couldn't really convince myself of it. I remember one night lying awake in bed, the room was feeling unsettlingly quiet. Then, there it was again, that rustling. But this time it was louder, closer. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, my heart pounded as I slowly walked toward the window and slowly parted the curtain. The moonlight lit up some parts of the outside area, but not enough to highlight what I was looking for. As my eyes adjusted, I was able to see that the figure was once again outside, only this time it was closer. It wasn't on the edge of the woods anymore, it was just on the edge of the yard. I couldn't make out its features, but I could tell that it was staring right at me, watching me in the window. I felt that cold dread settle in my stomach. I woke my wife up and we called the local police. I didn't tell them there was some weird creature in the yard. I just told them that some person was creeping around the house. By the time they got there, the thing was gone. They did a quick sweep, and by the end of it, told us that it was probably just a local. Mostly harmless, but definitely odd. He told me that if it happened again, to just yell at them to leave. and if they didn't, then I should call them again. For the last 3 nights there, we were incredibly jumpy, and every single noise would cause me to get those same chills. But the thing wasn't around anymore. I thought that it was seriously gone. Like, they may have been right, and the police presence ended up scaring this person away. On the last night of our stay, I remember waking up suddenly, like some alarm had gone off in my head. I sat up and listened, but it was pretty much just the normal silence. Until I heard what sounded like a slight creaking sound. I knew that creaking. It was the sound that the front step on the porch made when you approached the front door. I jumped up, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight, and I ran down the stairs. When I got down to the living room, there was nobody there. I hit every switch on the way, lighting up all the rooms, but there was nothing in the house. However, when I got to the entryway, my heart stopped. The door was cracked open, like it had been unlocked, opened, and left slightly ajar. I yelled for my wife to call the cops, and I jumped out onto the front porch, but there was nothing there. I stayed outside and waited for the cops to show up again, and I told them about the whole thing. That I'd heard the boards creaking and that the front door was open, and that I thought that it was whoever or whatever had been watching the house over the last week or so. They took the information and told us that they would patrol the area, which was great, except that we were leaving in less than 8 hours. I did not sleep the rest of that night. I just sat on the couch in the living room and watched the window, thinking that this stupid thing had ruined my relaxation. I have no idea what or who that thing was. It didn't really look like it was a human, just human-like. But the police said it was likely someone from the area just being a creep, and I'm certain that whatever it was capable of unlocking and opening the front door. I'm glad that nothing else occurred, that it didn't come upstairs and we weren't hurt or anything, but it was still the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. In the end, I'm never going to know what it was, and I am never going to vacation in that town ever again. Back in the summer of 2016, I went on a solo backpacking trip across Europe. A trip that I'd wanted to do since I was a 13-year-old kid learning about Europe in history class. I say that it was across Europe, but it was mostly focused on one section, and most of that was Italy. There was one particular city that I wanted to spend time in, which was Venice, the city on the water. With its maze of canals and historical architecture, it gives me the chills. I'm a nerd, I know. Anyways, Venice was my main destination, and let me tell you, it did not disappoint. But my story isn't about the beauty of the city. No. It's about one unforgettable and, honestly, bone-chilling encounter that I had while I was enjoying my once-in-a-lifetime vacation. After a few days of sightseeing, I decided to spend the day on the Lido, which is the island known for its beach. I arrived early with the intention of lazing around and just taking it easy. Now, I do what I can to not look too much like a tourist, but I am an American, and I hate to say it, I know that I stood out. I'm sure that it was obvious that I wasn't a local. I speak enough Italian to order food and keep myself out of trouble, but beyond that, if the person speaking to me didn't know at least basic English, then we weren't chatting. While I was walking around taking in the sights of the city, I accidentally bumped into this guy with a green jacket. I know that's a strange descriptor for him, but it was a pale lime green, and it made him kind of obvious in the sea of people. When I bumped into him, I instinctively said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I should have said it in Italian, but it was reactive to say it in English. The man looked at me with a bit of a grin and said, "Not a problem," in English with a really heavy Italian accent. I nodded and turned to walk away, thinking that that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. As the day went on, I started to notice that he was everywhere that I was. If it weren't for the green jacket, I probably wouldn't have noticed him, but I saw him numerous times throughout the morning. I thought maybe I was just crazy. Maybe he had a thing for me. Maybe he was an undercover police officer watching the tourist. I don't know. But I didn't want to assume the worst. A little voice in my head said to keep an eye on him, but I wasn't going to assume that he was going to do anything beyond just watch me, and I would keep my guard up. But as the day went on, I kept noticing him. The cafe, the ice cream stand, even when I was at the beach. When I saw him at the beach, I'd had enough. I didn't want to cause a scene in the middle of another country, but I also didn't want to just lay down and accept some weirdo being, well, weird. I decided that I would confront him, show them that I knew that he was there, and that he wasn't sneaky. But as I approached him, he looked me dead in the eyes, stood up from his seat, and walked away. And that was strange, but I thought maybe he'd gotten the point. I stayed on the beach for the rest of the afternoon, just sitting there and absorbing the sunset, the sky being painted with this gorgeous orange and pink, and I was in heaven. After a bit longer, I decided that it was time for me to leave, but when I turned to grab my backpack, I froze. My backpack was missing. I jumped up, trying to think about how it could have been taken. I hadn't been in this spot for that long, but yet it was nowhere to be found. I started to scan the area with my panic rising. I needed that backpack. It had all my documents, my money, and my medications in it. And without all that, I was a foreigner with no papers in a country thousands of miles from home. But that's when I saw him. The man with the green jacket at a bit of a distance, holding what looked like my backpack. He was walking away from the beach at a leisurely pace, not making it obvious that he was trying to escape. I took off after him at a full sprint. He kept on weaving his way through the narrow lanes of Lido, and I followed him. It felt like a nightmare, watching this man get away with basically my life, running but not seeming to make any progress on him. Finally, he disappeared into a small, run-down building. Gathering every ounce of courage, I followed him in, figuring I was going to have to be aggressive to get my stuff back. The building was eerily quiet, my breathing being the only thing filling the silence. I turned the corner, and there he was. He was on the ground. He had dumped the contents of my bag and was sifting through my belongings. I confronted him, yelling, "Hey, a-hole!" Anger overruling my fear by this point. He looked at me a bit surprised that I had found him, but he didn't really look too concerned. Then he started shouting at me in Italian, and I'm not even going to bother typing what he said, because I have no idea what it was. I just know that it sounded aggressive. He stood up, reached in his back pocket, and he pulled out a switchblade. My heart skipped a beat as I thought about the fact that I was now in a situation where I could very likely be killed or severely injured, and probably not be found for a little while. He started walking towards me, waving his knife around, and continuing to say things that I honestly couldn't understand. As he approached me with clear intent to do me harm, I had to think quickly on my feet to get out of this situation, and I did something that I was insanely proud of. He got within striking distance, and I lifted my leg, kicking him with all of my strength in the family jewels. I have strong legs, I was walking across a large portion of a country, so I'd been doing a lot of working out and physical training. And I know that I have a pretty damn strong kick. He tried to swing at me when I made a move, but I was definitely quicker, and my kick hit its target. Part of me thinks that he was expecting me to square up and we would just go man to man, or for me to just put my hands up in fear. He really did not expect a swift kick in his manhood. He fell to his knees and he dropped the knife, screaming in agony and continuing to curse me in Italian. I knew some of those words, so I knew that he was not in a good way. I ran over and shoved all my stuff back into my bag, and I booked it out of the building. I didn't even bother looking back, but I heard this guy yelling at me and groaning in pain. I got back out onto the streets, and honestly, the cool evening air was rather welcoming. I ran back to the hotel, and I did file a report with the police, but I don't think they ever found the guy. Thankfully, that was the only bad thing that happened to me on this trip, and I didn't let it get to me, though I did keep my backpack around my arms at all times after that. Overall, I would rate the vacation a good 4 stars out of 5. Italy is beautiful, Venice is amazing, and the Lido was an amazing relaxation spot. Minus 1 star for the crazy guy in the green jacket that decided to swipe my bag, though. Hi, Raven. How are you? I hope you're good. Well, thank you, subscriber. I hope you're doing well as well. My family used to travel around the country a lot. We're from the US. This was during the late 90s and early 2000s. My parents had us stay in an RV, in tents, in motels and hotels, anything and everything because they wanted us to be well-grounded and get a chance to see the country. My parents were the easygoing hippie types that had a more lax method of parenting. So it wasn't weird for my siblings and I to curse, run around, not pay attention, and it was kind of a mixed result with the 3 of us. I'm not going to name the town because a majority of the people who lived and worked there were great people, and it's not fair for them to be associated with any of this. We arrived at a hotel room somewhere in the desert beside an old highway that had certainly seen better days. Fortunately for this spot, people were drawn here for tourism reasons. I didn't know what was so exciting about this old town. We got to stay in a hotel that was supposed to be haunted by the ghost of a lady who owned it back in the 1800s or something. I think she'd been killed by someone who was staying the night, but I don't remember. I wish I had paid attention, but as a kid, I didn't care, and I just wanted to run around. It was one of those old ghost towns that draws in tourists, if that helps. We unpacked our things and we settled in for the night. I shared a room with my little brother, who only shuts up when he goes to sleep. He was chatting away and I was ignoring him when I heard whispering coming from the room. There was an old built-in closet, possibly an addition from the 70s. I thought it was my dad playing a trick on us, and I opened the door. But no one was there. I kept hearing it and looked around for the sound. My little brother had already fallen asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I told my parents about it, and I asked them if it was them. They said no, and they teased me saying that the ghost must have visited me. I told them that it sounded like a male voice, though. We asked the lady at the front desk about it, and I hated how everyone took this as a joke. She said that this town has its fair share of violence, and there were a lot of people who died. Their bodies went unclaimed by the city morgue and were buried in the local graveyard. Maybe one of these ghosts were the ones who visited me? I hated her stupid, condescending face, and as a kid, I wanted to hit her so hard. I didn't say anything, and my family left to go about our day. We saw the sights, had lunch and dinner at the local places, and then came back for our final night. I was exhausted, and I wanted to sleep so badly. I didn't care if there was a ghost in my room. I walked up to my room and saw that housekeeping had given us clean sheets. I started to change my clothing for bed when I noticed what looked like a red light on the wall that I hadn't noticed before. I got up off the bed, walked over, and stared at it. Now, around the room were random antiques to add realism, I guess, to the history of the place. I moved the wooden dolls out of the way and discovered that a camera had been placed there. The camera was much larger than the ones today, obviously. My brother and I hadn't damaged anything in the room, and we only had a little bit of conversation. We were mostly quiet. Nothing to warrant a camera, and especially not somewhere where two minors were changing. I ran into my parents' room, told them what happened, and I practically dragged them into my room to show them what I was talking about. My parents are normally incredibly easygoing people. Live and let live is their motto. But this made them incredibly angry. They asked us to call the police, and they took the camera. A report was made, but ultimately no one knew who had placed the camera in there, nor why. We stayed in our parents' room because we didn't have any other options, and we left as soon as we could. I think my parents just wanted to get us home to where we would feel safe. My parents actually changed after that. They became a lot less trusting of strangers, and they wanted to know what we were doing way more often. We also didn't go on as many family trips like we used to. I changed too. I actually check rooms for cameras now whenever I go anywhere. But that was my experience, Raven. I'm sorry that this wasn't that long, but I hope that you and your listeners can all enjoy it. Hi. Okay. I wanted to send this story in for ages, and I finally got around to it. I hope you and your subscribers like it, Raven. Right after COVID happened and things began to open back up, my family and I were going stir-crazy being in the house all day. Every day. For near enough years. We didn't and couldn't really do any international travel, so instead we decided to go down to one of the more secluded beaches in a friend's renovated van. It would give us privacy and we could leave whenever we wanted to. We ended up getting into some minor debts afterward, and that meant we had to do some things on the cheap. I napped nearly the whole way down to the beach, ignoring everyone. I woke up to the windows open and the smell of the ocean coming through. It was really nice to go out into the warmth and to run around on the beach. There were barely any people there, but that also meant that there were no lifeguards either, and no red or yellow flags to say that it was being monitored. There were some families and some older couples, I'm guessing retirees who were walking around with their dog. It was a beautiful day, one that I'm going to remember forever. When dusk started to settle in, my dad broke out the barbecue and started to cook for the family, while Mom and I prepared the salad. We ate together watching the waves come in, and made sure that we weren't too close due to the rising tide. We got some videos for Facebook to send to our relos overseas, and for our social medias. I was going to send some beach pictures for you to show on the screen, but I don't want anyone to find us. We packed up and settled in for the night. Since I had already slept earlier, I was wide awake, and I couldn't sleep. I sat using my iPad mindlessly trying to find something to do when I heard a noise outside the van. It sounded like a group of people walking past. They were being loud and I figured maybe they were drinking. I frowned, turned up my music and tried to drown it out, and jumped when I heard a loud smack on the side. My dad had already woken up, and he went outside with a torch. A flashlight, but that's what Aussies call them. My family are Aboriginal, and let's just say there were racist slurs written on the side of the van. I'm not going to repeat them, but they were pretty disgusting. The next morning we cleaned it off and went to one of the local fish and chip shops. We got our food, and my mom loves to have a yarn or chat with people. She brought up what happened last night. The lady was pretty apologetic, and said that the area had had an increase in racist groups in the town. When we decided to come here, we had no idea about this, and she asked how long we were going to stay. My dad said a couple more days. I think if he was by himself, he would have stayed in the same area, but because he had us with him, he wanted to keep us safe. We drove to another area. This time it was close to a strip of stores, and we got permission from the owners to stay there, especially after we told them what had happened. That night was uneventful. We didn't want to let the racist win, so we went back to the beach to spend some time there again. We had a good day, and we didn't let things get to us as hard as it was. There were a few groups of people walking around, and we were people watching and trying to work out whether they were the racists who wrote the slurs on the vans. That said, so many people were welcoming and friendly to us. When the sun started to go down again, we started to pack up, and it kinda sucked. We had permission to be there, and being so close to the ocean was beautiful. But it changed the trip. My dad was tense, and my mom was worried the whole time. I wasn't too worried. I figured they would only try something again at night, because that's what cowards tend to do. Other than some suspicions and some dirty looks from some of the locals, I'm not sure who it was. When we came back home, we told our family about what had happened, and they were honestly surprised about the area. Since I was curious, I decided to do some digging into it, and there was a supposed increase in hate groups in that section of town. The area was otherwise beautiful, and most people were alright, and I guess that things could have gone worse. So, my friends, this was today's video. A collection of scary vacation stories, if you will. Scary stories that happen where the original poster is supposed to be enjoying their time, relaxing and doing nothing. And yet, the relaxation was cut short by something or someone being creepy. It sucks, doesn't it? They're just there to have a good time, to relax, to do nothing, and then some force of nature, be it person or not, has to ruin it. Damn shame. Yeah. I don't really take vacations much. I guess I should say we don't really take vacations much. She's in the same room, so we don't take a whole lot of vacations. Obviously, since 2019, however you want to look at it, we definitely haven't taken any vacations. The closest to a vacation we took was the one night we stayed at a hotel because our basement flooded with sewage. That hotel sucked. It was awful. It was awful. That was our last vacation. We should probably take a vacation. Yeah. Anyways, if you have a vacation story or a story you want to share, you can go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. If you enjoyed this video, the stories inside of it, within it, my brain's tired. I'm sorry. If you enjoyed the stories within it, she's laughing at me, hit the like button above the video. It helps. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, hit the subscribe button. It helps. If you feel so bold, leave a comment down below with your thoughts on the stories, how you're doing, how your week's going, anything and everything. It helps. And you can also do a super thanks, which is tip to the channel, which is just supporting the channel further. It helps. You can also join Patreon or memberships to get early access to content like this or things similar, depending on what you sign up for and how you sign up for it. It helps. I'm saying that repeatedly to make her laugh. Sorry. And then, after all is said and done, you can remember that you are loved. You are valid. You are important. You're the best you that you can be. Don't forget it and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And, my beautiful friend, until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.